Okay, I'm going to talk about the problem of jammed cartridges. It seems to come up a lot these days. There are two places that move the film in the camera. First of all, there's the claw, and it pulls down one frame at a time here, at the film window here. But not, but that's not the only place that moves the film. The film also has to be taken up. It needs to end up wound up here. And that's done with this core and a device in the camera that turns this core. And as you can see, when I rotate that core manually, the film should move like that. What's happened with jammed cartridges is that the claw, the thing inside the camera that's pulling down one frame at a time, has done a lot of its good work, but the thing that rotates this has failed. The thing in the camera that rotates the core of the cartridge has failed. It's slipped. The reason it slips is because it's meant to slip. It's on a clutch, a slip clutch. What happens is, of course, as more film is taken up, the diameter gets bigger. So if you're running the camera at 18 little pictures per second, 18 little frames per second, that's, about this much film. The amount of rotation necessary to take up that much film per second will decrease as the diameter of this increases. So it needs to be able to slip. The problem is when it slips at the wrong time, it slips completely and stops taking up at all. What happens is frames are being pushed into the cartridge, but it's not being wound up here, and so you end up with a train smash of concertinaed film here. Now, that concertinaed film, it might be possible to fix, but it might not. The concertina itself may mean that the film is not stacked nicely on top of itself when you do wind it up, and it creates too much friction. But let's work on the assumption that it is fixable. If you've got a cartridge that's had this problem where it's not taken up here, but it's pulled down here, so as in you've identified that a cartridge is jammed in some way, putting it in another camera isn't going to help. That camera isn't going to be able to undo the train smash that's here. It's something that you have to do yourself. One thing that gets said a lot is, gee, it can't be the camera, it must be the cartridge because it worked last time. The camera worked last time. It's this time that it didn't work, and the only difference is this cartridge. The thing is, you've got to understand that this clutch, being able to slip, well, let me put it this way. It's a little like being able to juggle. A lot of people say they can juggle, and they can juggle. Some of those people, will only mess up their juggling occasionally, and other people will mess it up maybe half the time. But both people can still say they can juggle. Just some don't juggle as well as others, and that's what goes on with the slip clutch. Yeah, sure, it works, but it doesn't work like perfectly, so sometimes it's going to fail on you depending on just random things. So how to know when a cartridge is jammed? Well, I've sort of covered this in another video on the same page, so you should look at that. In that video I talk about the film transport indicator. That's something that flashes or blinks. If that's ceased to flash or blink while you're looking through the viewfinder or wherever the indicator is, then sure enough the core has stopped rotating. The other thing is, of course, that the sound will be different. Once it's jammed, it'll no longer be making a sound like it's doing actual work. You won't hear this sort of gentle cat purring sound underneath the sound of the motor running. Instead, you're just going to hear the motor sounding perfect, like it's working really well. That's a sign that it's not working well. But anyway, that's covered in another video. Most often, people find that the cartridge hasn't worked because they've taken it out of the camera and they can't see the word exposed here. The best way to find out whether that's actually a jam or you just haven't finished the roll is to take something that's going to help you rotate the core. I use a pair of scissors. Now just rotate it clockwise. It's essential that you only go clockwise. In this instance, I'm turning and there was no rotation necessary before it started moving. So that means the film was tight and there's no slackness, so the film was transporting. But let's imagine the situation where there is a failure of taking up here, and the claw is pushing film into the cartridge. So now I've pushed some film in here and there'll be looseness. If I go to do this test, there's going to be some rotations. I've already rotated it like 3 times and the film still hasn't started moving. And eventually it will. There it is. So there was quite a lot of slack. And that's an indication that the camera had stopped being able to move the film. So the first thing to do if you've got a cartridge that's had this problem is to take up that slack and then give it a few more turns and make sure it's turning freely. Sometimes when you do this you find, oh, I can make it move, but it's taking a lot of force to do it. That will never work. You have to, and the only solution is to keep rotating until you feel that now it's fairly loose. There's a chance that the camera's going to be able to do it. And if it takes an awful lot of pressure to turn it, there's a danger you're going to snap the film. So it's good karma to begin just by pulling a bit down to make sure that the film is free here. It can be necessary to lift it up off the pressure plate there and just make sure it's free. Then do the winding thing and see how loose it is. Alright, and then if necessary, keep winding until it's nicely loose. Some people, what they do is that they'll have wound up the slack here, and then they'll have put a pen mark on the film, like a dot, and then they'll put the cartridge back in the camera and squeeze the trigger, and take it out and say, well, I can't see the dot anymore, therefore the film is being transported. Actually, that's not a good test. The reason it's not a good test is because if you've just taken up the slack, then sure enough, the claw will be able to push some film down. It doesn't tell you that this is rotating. The only way to find out with the dot test if this is rotating is to take the cartridge out of the camera and not tighten this, and then put a dot on it, and then put it back in and try it. And that'll tell you if there's a train smash here. Really, the dot test isn't nearly as useful as just testing to assess the amount of slackness. Lastly, just to summarize and to give you a list of what to do when you first encounter the problem, take the cartridge out of the camera, loosen this a little bit, make sure it's not stiff, rotate this clockwise. If you go the wrong way, you'll break something. Rotate it clockwise until it's moving nicely, and that could take several turns. You get it as free as it'll go, and then you can try it again in the same camera or in a different camera. The most important thing is to learn what kind of a transport indicator your camera has, and for that you should look at the other video on this page.